Okay, so we're continuing our sessions on the different moods. Okay, so we've got a the mood of the various different moods that we have. So there's the imperative and the infinitive, and then we'll look at some participles eventually. But for now, just to remember, we've looked at imperative, so just the second person singular and plural. So our standard verbs, luo and philo, to untie and to love. We had a way of being able to indicate if we wanted to command somebody or to request or to please with somebody to do something. And so we had a look at that. So luo, we will remember went to, let's get a pen up, lue, and then the second person plural was luete, and of course that is identical to the present second plural. So we have to be able to distinguish between whether we are commanding somebody or asking somebody to do something, or whether we're just making a statement, and the context will indicate which is which. And then with the aorist, so there's two different ways of giving a command or an instruction. There's the present, which has that sort of continuous idea of doing it continually, and then the aorist type, which has that idea of just being able to just state that this is the command to do, and it doesn't give any indication how often it should be done. It just is, it's undefined in that sense. And because we're dealing with moods, although the aorist in the indicative, so when it talks in a past tense, it has an epsilon in front of it. It doesn't when it comes to the imperative. And so the aorist won't have epsilons in front of them. Can somebody, whoever needs to be muted, can they just mute themselves? Because a bit of feedback, if that's all right, thanks. So we have luson, and then we have lusate, okay, which are two aorist forms for the imperative, and then philo, which is our epsilon omega verbs. They just have a little bit of an extra iota there for lue and luate. And then with the aorist, we did talk about what happens when you include the sigma, and how the epsilon lengthens, but it doesn't contract then with the other vowels it might get to. So actually what happens is, oops, oh, I did that wrong. Sorry, you'd have realized that. I meant to put fillet and filete. And then with our aorist for philo, then we have fileson and then filesate. So the epsilon lengthens and stays, but it turns into an eta, and then the sigma gets included as the aorist, and then obviously the endings are as you'd expect. So that was the imperative. We looked at that last time, and just gives us an idea on the form for those. So we're going to look at the infinitive today. So it would be a good idea just to check what the infinitive is. So let's just have a look at some grammar. So I'll just give once again the idea of moods, just to remind you. So we have in the indicative mood, which we've talked about. So they make statements and questions. And so we have the present tense, and we have the imperfect and the aorist and the future tense. When we talked about those, and we said simple sort of statements, I am teaching, were you teaching, as a question, she will be teaching as a future, can I teach, and so on. So that's those are the things we've looked at before. And then there is some other moods. So the imperative, which we've now looked at and just reminded you. So the commands or exhortations. So something like teach, or you teach the lesson. You're being instructed to do something. Then there is an infinitive, which we're going to look at today, which is just, in one sense, the uninflected form of a verb, just the general idea of a verb. And we'll see how it's used in lots of different ways, actually. But it's actually quite simple to spot. It's got a little bit of variety in terms of where it can come up in a particular sentence. And then there's participles, which we'll look at next, and then subjunctives, which come up sometime later, which are to do with uncertainty. So you might do something. So those are lots of different different moods that we need to kind of cover in terms of our understanding of our own sentences and our own speech and language. So let's have a little look specifically at the infinitive. So as I said just a minute ago, the infinitives are the uninflected form of a verb, i.e. it hasn't got endings or things at the front of it or anything like that. In one sense, it's the simple verb as it comes out. So it's what we might say is the base form before it's put into a tense or a subject or something like that. So they can act as nouns, adjectives, or adverbs. Okay, so when they come in a sentence, they could be acting in the place of a noun of some sort, or it might be describing a noun in some way, or it might be describing a verb, an adverb. It might be describing a verb. So we'll see that in some examples in a moment. And the other thing which infinitives do is that they kind of give they can convey purpose, so something that we want to do, something that's intended to do. And so there are certain verbs that we use, and we're going to meet some of those in Greek, that then have an infinitive that follows it. So I'll give you some examples of what I mean by all of that and trying to get your sort of understanding of what this infinitive is. So in its uninflected form, the verb listen, to listen, as an infinitive is to listen. Well, it doesn't say much, it's not part of a sentence, okay, but that's what we would spot if we were looking for an infinitive. It would look like that in a sentence. Okay, we have the word to in front of the verb to give us an idea that we're using an infinitive. So a simple sentence: the class were asked to listen. And here the infinitive is here, to listen. The verb of the sentence is asking. Okay, to ask. That's the verb that the sentence is about. And the class were asked to do something, or they were asked to listen. And so the listen here, or to listen, is an infinitive, which is acting in the place of a noun. It's giving you some kind of indication as to what the children were asked to do. So rather than using a noun, we can use the form of the verb, which is in its infinitive form. So we use an infinitive. And we understand what that means in English, and we can spot it because it's pretty straightforward to spot an infinitive, and it will be in Greek as well. But it's not always acts just as a noun, which is what it's really doing there. It can act as an adverb or as an adjective. So in this case, if we look at the second example, so he taught the class Greek to help them with their Bible study. So in terms of the sentence, we can spot the infinitive because it's this one here, to help. And what is going on here is that it adds some information to why the class were being taught. Okay, so we could say it's an adverb because it's describing something to do with the teaching. So he taught the class Greek to help them with their Bible study. And so here it's acting as a noun. Here it's acting as an adverb. Now, you don't necessarily need to understand the technicalities of this in order to be able to translate, because you'll see an infinitive and you'll translate it as it says, and it should fit then into the sentence that we understand. So just to appreciate that an infinitive has a kind of quite wide range of where it can be used within a sentence. The other thing that it does is it conveys purpose. So we have certain verbs which we use to tell that we want to do something, we intend to do something, we wish to do something, we desire to do something. Okay, all of those things, or even it's necessary, or it's allowed to, or it's permitted to do things. So here in this example is one of the purpose verbs. And so if I was to say I intend, then it needs something to come after it. And so we have an infinitive which comes after it. I intend to listen to the teacher. And so the infinitive here is used to finish off really what we intend to do. In the same way, the last one here, it is necessary to listen to the teacher, um, is also conveying a purpose, something that needs to be done. It's necessary to listen to the teacher. In both of these cases, um, we have these purpose sort of verbs, or certain verbs that give us some kind of indication of something that needs to happen afterwards. And so these are different varieties of places where we might use the infinitive. But when we translate a sentence, we'll be able to work out um, where it fits in the sentence and make sense of it. We first of all obviously need to be able to spot what an infinitive looks like in Greek. So that's an indication of what we're talking about. We're talking about this part of a use of a verb which can find its place in sentence in a number of different ways. So let's just see how that might work in Greek. So let's have a little look at, first of all, its formation and a couple of examples, and just to sort of go through essentially what we've just done in English, but in Greek. So you'll be pleased to know that there are not many forms here. The infinitive is fairly straightforward. It does come in its present form, and it comes in the aorist form, okay, like the imperative did. So if you take luo to meaning to untie, then the present infinitive is going to be spotted by luein. Okay, so we have the ending here, so it has its own ending, and that's our present infinitive. So that would mean to untie. If that comes up in a sentence, that's what it's saying. And likewise, we have an aorist form, which is going to have the standard sigma, which is put in there, and then it has its own ending, so luce. So you can sort of see that there are some similarities with the imperative, that with the aorist imperative, you had the sigma that was included. Note there's no epsilon again, because it's not about the time, it's just about the aspect. So again, the present and aorist have that distinction in Greek, which is to do with the continuous and the undefined aspects. And philo has a similar idea behind it, which we had in the imperative. So for the present, for the epsilon omega verbs, we have lu. Oh, not lu. I did that last time, didn't I? Try and get it right. Philane, which is quite useful because it's just the same. And for the philo, it's philese, which is the contraction, the lengthening of the epsilon, as the sigma is kind of placed in there. So those are your basic forms for infinitive, and so if you spot the ending with the ein, then you'll note that you're working with an infinitive, and obviously with the aorist, you look out for the endings. It's got this very specific endings. So a couple of examples. So we've got an example here, poiesen tous dolus, graphen tous logus. So we've got to sort out what these words are. Poiesen is from the verb poio, which is to make or to do or to make. And here we have the epsilon at the start of it, which tells us that we are dealing with at least the past tense. So it's either going to be the imperfect or the aorist. And then we look at our endings, and we've got an aorist here. So he made. Okay, so and it's the third person singular. So he made. All right. So he made, and then we've got tous doulos, which is the slaves from doulos, and that's our plural form, and it's the accusative, which obviously is the subject of our sentence. Okay, so he made the slaves. And then this is our infinitive here. All right, graphane, and that comes from grapho, which is to write. So if we literally put it, we would put to write, but it won't make sense for us. So he made the slaves write. You could put to write. So he made the slaves write, and then to slogos. So just a note here that the infinitive will follow with an accusative. Okay, so we are going to put accusatives after these. So he made the slaves write, and then this is the words or the message or something along those. Whoops, words. Right, so this comes from logos. Okay, so there we have our sentence. He made the slaves write the words. Okay, if we look at number 2, and just to say with number 1, is it a present one? Just has that perhaps that continuous notion there of what he's making the slaves do. Right, number 2. So we've got tesan, terase, tain, eranane. Now this is one of those words which you kind of need to just get used to spotting. The front here, which has got an epsilon added to the verb, which is, I'll write it underneath, I'll do it in a different color. It's actually from ato, which is to ask. And what you've had is the epsilon's added to the front of it, and it's combined with the alpha and the iota, and so they've all turned into this letter here. All right, and then on top of that, the epsilon here, because it's an epsilon omega verb, has turned and lengthened into this eta here. All right, so kind of the only bit that's left from the whole original verb is the tau, which is the bit in the middle, a bit at the start of there. So it's one of those ones where you kind of have to realize it's changed its form quite considerably. So it's the verb to ask. It's in the aorist because of the ending there and the epsilon at the front of it, and it's in the third person plural. Okay, so you just have to go back to your charts and you'll work out that you've got they asked. So that's what that says. And then we've got terase, and here we have our infinitive. Okay, so it's an aorist infinitive this time because of the ending. Tero is a epsilon omega verb again, and therefore we have this lengthening of the eta. And so they asked means to keep. They asked to keep, and then tain eranane, which is peace. They asked to keep the peace. All right, so that's some examples there of how we might find the infinitive and how we then might just translate it. We did mention the fact it has to convey purpose as well, and so there are 4 words here which we need to learn. So this is its own verb, fellow, which can be used to I wish, he, she, you wish, he, she, it wishes, we wish, you wish, they wish, okay, or want. So it'll have its own endings as a verb. But then there's these 2 other verbs, 2 verbs here, which are these ones. So de and existi is it is necessary and it is permitted. You'll only find it in that form. So they're quite straightforward. They only come as those words, and they will follow with the infinitive because they are giving some kind of purpose. And then you've got mellow, which is another verb here, which is to intend, or I'm about to. And again, that will have endings similar to thello. So these 4 words here, which we need to learn, or verbs that we need to be aware of. They work in exactly the way that you would once you know what they are. So in these examples here, so we've got day, which is it is necessary, and kalein, which comes from kallo. So this kallo, so that's our infinitive. All right, and we have our so it is necessary to call. So kallo is to call, and then tein ecclesian, which is the church. So we just have it is necessary to call the church. Okay, so you just got to kind of learn the fact that you would expect an infinitive to follow the word day, and it's translated as necessary. And then here we have just the last example, just to finish off here. So we've got thelamen, which is the first person plural of the verb to wish. So we wish, or we are wishing, or we want. So we want, well, let's put it as we want, I think, because of what follows. We want or we wish. And then akuse. So this is from the verb akuo, which is to hear. Again, we have an infinitive for us, and it's an aorist infinitive. So we want to hear. And then two slogos, which we talked about earlier, as in the words. So we want to hear the words. And then two yasu, which is yesu, which is the genitive. So we want to hear the words of Jesus. I'll just highlight that there as well. So we're trying to spot an infinitive today, and just to sort of translate some of those. And what I'd like you to have a go at to start with is just to see if you can write the correct infinitive or imperative for these verbs. All right, so you just need to think about the two parts that we have, and I've chucked in a few imperatives in there as well to remember. So depending on whether it's present or aorist, depending on what ending it needs, it depends on whether it's an epsilon omega verb as to whether you need to have the form change slightly at the end. So let's have a go at doing some of those, see if we can just write them. So not translating anything, we're just trying to write the correct Greek for these particular verbs that we have in the indicated in the brackets. I'll stop the recording.